Welcome to the Social Hotelier Show. I'm your host, Sam-Erik Ruttmann, coming to you from Helsinki. Today's episode takes us on a journey into the future of food, where innovation, identity, and even survival intersects. Let's face it, our love for food runs deep. It is not just about nourishment, it's about flavor, memory, and connection. People travel thousands of miles just to try a noodle in Tokyo, an authentic kimchi in Gwangju, a taco in Mexico City, or a rustic wine in Tuscany. In fact, this has actually been a huge motivation for me why I started to work in the hospitality industry, because I love food. We crave new tastes, unfamiliar ingredients, and the stories that come with them. Food inspires us to venture beyond the familiar in many ways. It defines how we experience the world. But what happens when climate change, science, and shifting values radically change how and what we eat? What does that mean for chefs, hoteliers, and destinations that thrive on authenticity? My guest today is Dr. Yeoman, Professor of Disruption, Innovation, and New Phenomena in Hospitality and Tourism at the Hotel Management School, Leeuwarden, a renowned futurist and author of The Future of Food Tourism. In his newest edition, Ian doesn't just describe trends, he introduces 4 bold, even unsettling scenarios that challenge our assumption about the food we serve, the guests we welcome, and the culture we preserve. So get ready for a rich and provocative conversation that will make you rethink the role of food in our future. Ian, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sam.
I'm so delighted that after a time we met in Zagreb, that I have you here as my guest, because I was so fascinated about your talk at that time, and I realized that you have written several books, and when you suggested to me certain topics, I caught up with the food was the first thing I was thinking about, because it has to do with how I started my time in the hospitality industry. But it's really exciting that you're taking a very fresh and maybe a radically different view on things and looking in the future. So what will motivate you to revisit your 2014 book and create these radically different futures for the food tourism?
Several things. I think, first of all, like you, I'm interested in food because, as a professor in the hospitality and tourism industry, researching food, beer, and wine, why not? It's an excellent subject. You get to consume it and taste it. So it's part of life and part of what I enjoy and where it's going. And I've been doing future studies now for over 30 years, and I delve into different topics, from hotels to work to technology. But food's very close to my heart of where it is for various reasons. So I did a book back in 2014, 2015 about the future of food. And it's a collection of opinions about what people thought on the food direction. And when we were writing that book, people said very much the future they want. That's the question they want. And it was very much an extension of where we are now and going forward. So a lot of the collections and essays were about place. What does it mean to be French, and therefore how does it extend into our cuisine? There was a presumption food wouldn't change. The pizza in Italy would still be the same in 50 years. Malta would still be about rabbits and local dishes. The Netherlands would still be about bitten balls and cheese. But and that was a very linear approach. Nothing would change. And as a futurist, one of the fundamental rules of future studies is, if you think it's not going to happen, or you think the idea is ridiculous, it probably will happen at some point in the future. And also, when you're doing future studies and scenario planning in particular, you've got to think, you can't predict one future because I don't know what the exact future would be. And you've got to talk about alternative ideas and different perspectives. Some are very linear. Some things don't change. Some things are alternative opinion. But other things are based on science fiction and transformation. But what got me thinking was basically, over the last 3 or 4 years, sustainability and climate change has come to the forefront of the debate. And I was thinking, the whole debate is about we're not going to be at 1.5 degrees, we're going to be at 2.5, 3 degrees in the future. Therefore, that has fundamental implications on what the land would look like in the terms of farming. Would we still be growing these crops? And if farming changes, whether it's new crops or less crops or new forms of wine or beer, etc., it means what we eat changes. And that therefore changes the characteristics of place and what we are. And when I wanted to do the second edition of the book, I really needed to think, and I needed to take that idea forward. Because if climate change is 2.5 to 3 degrees, it's fundamentally different. So I was looking at the IPCC scenarios and saying, okay, if these scenarios occur, what does it mean for farming and food systems and production and distribution, et cetera, and food security? Therefore, create a set of scenarios that would take you out of the box. Some scenarios in the box and some scenarios out of the box. So create scenarios that you think would be challenging, both utopian and dystopian, but get people to think differently. Because if we don't think differently or understanding what is coming next, we become very complacent about what we've got. And we need to future-proof the future. And as a researcher, that's what I do. And as you said earlier, I have the job title of disruption, innovation, and new phenomena. Disruption is the change that's going to have, that's transformational and science fictiony and is abrupt. Innovation's how businesses adapt to that model of the future. And new phenomena are the new products and experiences that emerge from all of this change. So that was the challenge from my dean here at the hotel school. Think differently, push the box out. Because you're a professor, so you're a global thought leader in what you do. So lead from the front and create something differently. So that's what we did. We created a set of scenarios and we went out to experts and asked them to respond to those scenarios differently. And, the book is 19 chapters and 12 of those chapters are about design challenges. If this is the future, what's the product or the experience for this environment, this scenario? So that's the story of the book. It's what could happen, what's possible. And it's a bit of fun as well. And creativity, because I need to get students, industry, and researchers to get to the future. And the scenarios created that. So that's what the motivation was. That's what the purpose of the book was. And that's what we ended up in the terms of the final product.
Okay. So with that great introduction and now understanding, perhaps we can start with the first scenario that you started with. I think it's Dr. Spock's restaurant.
Yeah, Dr. Spock's restaurant. You can imagine where the idea came from. If you talk about science fiction in my generation, you've got to think of Spock in Star Trek.
Yeah.
So imagine if he had a restaurant, and what that restaurant would be like, because we live in a world where there's actually a lot of science in food. In food tourism, in cuisine. I just think of Heston Blumenthal, Nouvelle Cuisine, gastronomic experiences, and they're all science. In that role, the chef is actually the scientist in a laboratory. It's not cooking, it's a laboratory production. So in Dr. Spock's restaurant, we went very hedonistic. We went very sciencey. And it was all about the opening of a new restaurant in Tokyo, which is a very futuristic city. And the question fundamentally is the food system has collapsed, and it's a toxic environment. But we're very innovative in what we do in overcoming that. So basically we ask the question, imagine a world where more food is grown in the laboratory rather than in the field. So it completely changes how we think about food. But as we said, the chef is a scientist, and it's taking laboratory food in the innovations we see in science and innovations in agriculture, and just taking them a bit further to say that. So it brings challenges and it brings opportunities in the terms of what it's all about.
Yeah. I mean, well, of course, now all the chefs that are listening in here, they're getting a little bit start to think about how is their future. But if the chef becomes a scientist, or how will the soul of cooking disappear altogether if they are scientists and not the emotionally inspiring chefs? What is your thoughts on this?
No, they don't. Because, as we said, there's already a lot of science in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And production techniques have evolved and changed over time. There's a lot more preciseness in how we cook. And the classical example of the last 3 or 4 years is the evolution of the sous vide machine. That water bath, that slow cooking. It produces a different taste and a different texture. And some people say it's a lot better because it's slow cooking. It's a different way to taste. It's a lot more nutritional. So it's a different concept of what we do. And if you look at how the oven's changed over the last 30 years, there's that evolution in the terms of technology and science of how we do. And I think what's happening in the kitchen, the chef's role is evolving and changing. And one of the roles of a chef is there's a role there as a chef, as a scientist, in the terms of that construction. Because as a scientist, they're also a curator, they're an inventor, they're doing novelty and stuff like that. But also science is good in the terms of if you understand the science and what you're doing, there's the science of the food in the production system and the science of the food, the chef is actually also a nutritionist. We're all concerned about diet and what we eat and traceability, but the chef as a scientist wears that hat in the terms of nutrition. They're able to say to the consumer, this is what's in the food. This is the nutritional diet of where we go and what we do. So, and the chef is also, they're an experience creator.
Yes.
They are right at the heart of innovation societies what food does, and the chef wears that hat and wears that role. So to create that new novel experience where food becomes a lot more immersive and discussion, it becomes very fashionable. Mm-hmm. And it's a piece of art as well, which you see with your eyes. But you taste, it's the art of the taste as well. I talk about Heston Blumenthal, if there's a carrot in front of you, but it's actually a chocolate cake. It's a carrot that looks like a carrot, but when you taste it, it's actually a chocolate cake when you taste it. So that's, how we confuse people, and the consumer's looking for difference, excitement, and they're willing to taste and sample new things. So science brings you that preciseness. So it's nothing to be scared about. It's part of the evolution of being the chef. And also within that, we toss in the things which are around us. We talk about consumers that are the adventurous foodie who tastes the insects or eats them. There's a famous restaurant in Copenhagen or Denmark where you eat the raw insects with the food. But we're also bringing the issues around the role of science in the development of food, in the terms of you can talk about cell-based food or in vitro-based food. We can talk about the creation of artificial meat. We can talk about the creation of artificial fish as well, and in the terms of fish farms. So everything we've got in there is the role of science, and it's not to scare you, but it's to bring the debate to the forefront in the terms of what it is and what it is, because we live in this society which is actually a lot more educated. In the 1960s, 4% of the population in Europe went to university, whereas today, 40 to 45% of school leavers go to university. So they're more educated, they understand science, they're more aware, they travel the world. So they're more sophisticated in the terms of things. But, tourism, hospitality is part of the experience economy, and science drives change and novelty. And the ultimate experience to me is food, because it uses all senses rather than just like tourism, just you see something and gazing, where food is you consume it.
Yep.
So it's part of the advancement of food and cuisine.
Okay. Now, some people may say, well, could science-based cuisine democratize gourmet dining or deepen culinary inequality?
Well, I think democratization, that's an interesting question. There's several answers to that and different perspectives. If you look at the advancement of luxury, for example, luxury has advanced in society because it's all about the democratization. We've got more middle classes in the world, and as you get increased in middle classes, we experience different things. And right at the heart of the democratization of luxury has been food and cuisine in the terms of accessibility. We can afford to eat or treat ourselves in a Michelin-starred restaurant. We may not go there every day, but we're on holiday. It's a celebration. So all of that food becomes a point of democratization. And you've also got to remember how we access a Michelin-star restaurant. We do it at different points. So the lunch menu is different. The price for the lunch menu is usually different from the price of the dinner menu. There's always a special on somewhere. So restaurant prices and Michelin-starred restaurants price at different times in the terms of exclusivity. But even if you look at the history and the evolution of Michelin-starred restaurants, it's now about good cuisine. So a Michelin-starred restaurant can actually be a street vendor in Singapore to a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Oslo.
That's right. Yes.
But they're just different. What the script is for a Michelin-star restaurant is changing. Mm-hmm. So there's a degree of democratization on one hand, but on the other hand, if you look at even so the Royal Mayfair scenario, which is more about exclusivity, luxury has changed in the terms of luxury is no longer luxury if it's accessible to the vast majority of us. So we have to create different types of experiences within the experience economy that go beyond exclusivity. And that's probably around the scenarios of, if you look at Le Naturel and if you look at Roots, where craft and authenticity become the story of luxury. Yeah. A different aspect. So, some of the scenarios overlap and intertwine with each other. So
perhaps we can then move over to the second scenario, La Naturelle Food Trail, where you scenario shifts towards sustainability and wellness. So perhaps you can talk about this, and then because it's somehow something I can relate to being living in the Nordics.
Yeah, well. So, I apologize. This is where we need it. Did you say the root scenario or Le Naturel?
La Naturel.
Well, I think if you look at Naturel, it was a provocative question. As society and climate change, where food becomes more scarce, one of the things that scenario responds to is the advancement of science And in that scenario, the advancement of science is about mass production. And it's where a lot of the food tastes the same. So in your everyday discourse of what you're buying, it's the corporation that is controlling the food chain. And everything seems the same. So it's a world of McDonald's, and a McDonald's or a Burger King is the same everywhere. So food has become very homogenized.
Yeah.
It's homogenized. So the point of the scenario le naturel is, how do you create something that's very different in a different world? How do you create something that's about a paradise? How do you create something that's your vision? And it's like the Spice Girls, and they have a song called "What Do You Really, 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 Really Want?" And that's what that is about. Because the thing about this scenario is, it's a scenario where everybody can buy into it. Because the thing about food from a political perspective is all of the stakeholders, whether you're the farmer to the butcher to the restaurant or the destination, food is very important, because food is about the place you are. So here we have a scenario where we're using food to drive regenerative tourism, a regenerative approach, where we're focusing on looking at food as well-being and health, to create something that we want and we dream about. So it's about a journey to create something.
Yeah.
And it's about creating a better world. So that's what that scenario is all about. The natural food trail in Tuscany and slow food movement, a different society, what we dream about and what we want.
Yeah. So could this regenerative food tourism become the new status symbol in luxury travel?
Yeah, it does. And it's already happening there, because luxury is a very fluid concept in the terms of what we got. So it's a concept of Michelin-starred restaurant and materialism and high-end. But also, to many people, luxury is also about time and isolation, switching off from a fast, busy life. And also food it's also about creating something new, education. I've learned something. So for example, if we look at those in the Nordic countries, luxury to people in the Nordic country is about isolation and time, whereas if you're from China or India, it's more materialistic. So what the concept is and how you escape to it is very important. So, for example, one of the examples we talk about is the Faroe Islands. Faroe Islands are tiny. It's a tiny island in the terms of collection. It's not going to be mass tourism. It's got a sense of uniqueness, and it's about taking a regenerative hospitality perspective and putting people into the home of people from the Faroe Islands and getting them to understand what the cuisine is and living the experience. That's rustic, that's well-being, and it's small scale and slow scale and an immersive experience. So that's luxury. It's a very basic experience, but it's also expensive and high-end because of the degree of rarity and the limited capacity.
So will the chef now have a wellness responsibility beyond taste and presentation?
Yeah, they do. They do. And it's that the chef has a multiple role in society today. Yes. The chef is at the forefront of what food is. You've got the chef who's passionate about what is food and where it comes from. You've got the chef who's a food activist. They're the ones that are championing and creating the conversation about what food is and where it goes. You've got the chef as the innovator. You've got the chef as the historian who is the one that's working with historical ingredients from the destination and creating new dishes. You've got the chef who's the ambassador for the living culture, the cultural identity of a place and the food that they create. So the chef has head chef has a very broad understanding of cuisine, and they wear multiple hats going forward in the terms of what they do. So it's more than the kitchen. Yes. It's the story. It's the ambassador role. It's the historical role. There's a whole range of different things there.
Yeah, I remember being in Alsace, in France, where we stayed in a very nice hotel, and the chef was, when they presented the menu, they clearly made us understand that everything which is on the menu, all the produce and ingredients, is within the 3-kilometer radius. So,
yeah.
And they're relying on the seasonality, so you don't expect to see fresh squeezed orange juice there in the morning, but you have some berries,
yep.
or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated about this idea, and I love orange juice. So I thought, well, if I have to go for orange juice, then I better go to Sicily or Spain or Italy. But I was really impressed about their commitment to that responsibility about this idea that they only buy from or get from the local community. So that's really a regenerative way of handling this. So I was really impressed about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing about food. To me, one of the things about food, it's something we've all got an opinion about, and it represents who we are and our identity. And we need to go beyond our traditional perceptions of what the cuisine industry is. And you think about a career in the restaurant industry, it's more than the restaurant. Yes. And it's in the pivotal role of the chef, and the pivotal role of the chef of the future.
Yeah. So let's move over then to the Royal Mayfair. It's a little bit of a darker vision, I feel.
Well, yes and no. Royal Mayfair is to some, it's a dystopian scenario.
Yeah.
But luxury is about exclusivity.
Yeah.
And it's about, can you afford to go there in the terms of so this is a world to me, and this story was actually motivation by a film called Soylent Green.
Yes.
with Charlton Heston.
Soylent Green are people.
Yeah, Soylent Green are people and that type of thing. But if you were rich in society, you could afford real food.
Yeah.
And you lived in a gated communities, whereas the masses just had Soylent Green, which was a food tablet.
Yeah.
So we just extended that out and looked at that story and recreated it, looking at a dystopian world where there's the haves and the have-nots, exclusive restaurants in the Royal Mayfair Square Mile of London. The British government is running out of money. The royal family is in poverty, so they have to, you can dine with the King and Queen of England. Buckingham Palace is sponsored by Disneyland, and they've got a McDonald's at Holyrood Palace. So it's all about revenue and generosity and stuff like that. It's not narcissism, hedonistic. I've got money, so I'm going to enjoy it. Whereas you, the common people, you're my servants. You can you serve me. I may give you a few crumbs once in a while and experience that in the terms of that. But it's also a lot about innovation, and about driving that. Because one of the things I've learned is exclusivity is the 3-star Michelin-starred restaurant. The Michelin. I'll go back to the Michelin, but it's also about what the opposite side of that. What Michelin-starred restaurants do for a destination. Exclusive restaurants are the pioneers, the early adopters of trends. They set the scene for the mass of the restaurant industry, and they follow. They like the fashion show of Paris and Milan, And these are what Michelin star restaurants do. We look to them for the latest trend. So Royal Mayfair is about exclusivity and economic high value into that market, but it's and there's dystopian parts to it, but there's also parts to it that we want and will drive change of where the experience economy is going. Because also the restaurant industry is all about innovation. It's also about failure and high turnover. But if you create more economic well-being and economic value from this process, it does have a spin-down effect in the terms of what you've got. So exclusivity in Michelin-starred restaurants create value at the top that filter down to other communities in the terms of doing things.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, I'm just catching on this fine dining is exclusive to the elite in this Royal Mayfair. So is food tourism still cultural, or is it the power display?
I think there's a bit of both.
Yeah.
In the Royal Mayfair restaurant, there is a power display of where power is, and we show that off. So there's definitely that in, but that's the reality of tourism and hospitality. It's those that can afford it and those that can't afford it and those that are in the middle somewhere. So there's something about power and how power creates experiences, and it's how you deal with it and how you manage it.
Yeah. So then your final scenario, Roots, is perhaps the most grounded, focusing on authenticity, heritage, and culinary identity.
This is where food. Yeah. I apologize. You finish the question.
Yeah, it resonates with today's traveler seeking local, honest food. So please tell me how you approached to Roots and what that talks about more in detail.
Well, Roots it's about the place and the history. Yeah. There's also a degree about when we did the book, we did talk to climate change scientists and farmers and those that are involved in food production. And one of the things they did say was, we're very adaptable. Food changes. We invented the fertilizer. Food, we grow crops, for example. There's new forms of wheat there that adapt to climate change. We have new forms of rice, new forms of noodles that are all being researched and will come through. So to a certain extent, there's a degree of scaremongering in some of the scenarios you've written. But on the other hand, food is adaptable. So we can create something which is still about place, and we don't lose that place. So that's about that heterogeneous identity and about preserving history. Because again, it goes back to the role of the chef. He's a cultural ambassador. That chef is still that person that's interested in history. And, I was listening. So this is a scenario about Koh Samui in Thailand, one of the islands, and about what Thailand is doing in the terms of the food of Thailand, because Thailand as a destination has realized it's not just about the beach and sun and parties. There's a strong emphasis on food now to attract the tourist. And if you're living in this world where food is mass production, you need something that's what's local and how do you preserve it. Because from a climate change perspective, there's going to be winners and losers. Those that are in the middle of the equator, where heat is really intense, they have problems. That's the critical uncertainties. But there are other places where climate change is of benefit, or the impact of climate change is not as great. There's still going to be changes to water and food and what we do. So you get clusters of goodness. And this was about Cuisine, focusing on place, focusing on history and preserving that.
Very good.
And keeping its heterogeneous identity where history's at the forefront. So food's about being a cultural ambassador. And it's also very community orientated. where everybody's involved and everybody has a responsibility for food and that type of thing.
Yeah. I lived a part of my career in Thailand, so I'm very familiar with this approach. And one of the very popular programs that we created was culinary classes, where we invited one of the, depending on the restaurant, or a Thai chef to give a cooking class how to make som tam, or and all the authenticity. But I always made feel at one time, and actually when I look back, so I was wondering, is the pursuit of authentic cuisine a celebration or a curated illusion for tourists?
It's both.
Yeah.
It's both in the terms of that, because one answer to the question is authenticity adapts and changes. You know, for example, Walt Disney and Disneyland is an authentic experience. It has a history. Las Vegas has a history. So it's been curated and evolved, but people think it is an authentic experience and they wouldn't want it to be anything else. And that's the one thing about food. It does not stay stuck in the past. Food is about fusion. It blends, it changes of where we go and how we adapt it. It adapts to marketplaces. So, you know, food's about mobility, and you know, many of the restaurants of the world are managed or owned, or SMEs, small, medium operators, independent entrepreneurs. So where you take migrants, say, for example, coming from India, they're the ones that open the Indian restaurants, and that's what we do eat in the UK. The food of the UK is a curry.
Yeah.
It's a food of fusion, of development. And if you look at places like the West Midlands or the city of Birmingham, that city's cuisine is identified as the Balti. It's the immigrants that have come from India, settled in the West Midlands, and adapted to a food dish of that region. So food adapts and changes, but it still has that authenticity. I was watching a BBC TV. There's a series at the moment on the BBC called it's about global food, and we were looking at the food of Poland and the humble dumpling. And one of the roles of the chef has been twofold. What are the historical ingredients and fillings you associate with the Polish dumpling, and presenting that food to the consumer, but also taking the humble dumpling and being innovative with new flavors and new concepts and presenting it different ways. So it's still right. The dumpling in Poland is still at the heart of cuisine, of what it is, and it's authentic, but it's also adapted. So it's staged, but it's also rustic. But that's the great thing about food. It has diversity.
Yeah.
But what it's all about is good food, cooked the right way, presented the right way, in a very professional manner. And that's what cuisine and food tourism is all about.
Yeah. Fascinating, all these different scenarios. So if we move over into the design challenges, each scenario raises design challenges. What new experience could emerge, and so on. Maybe you can speak about how this might change how we build hotels, and what are the destinations for these possible futures.
When I've talked about many of the design challenges and experiences you've got there, and each scenario each scenario is shaped by 15 to 16 trends that create that story or that environment. And the design challenges were about taking some of the trends that were in there and redesigning things. So in one of the scenarios, there's a number of scenarios we can talk about, but one of the scenarios was about the Last Wine Club. We're living in a world where climate change has been very significant. You're talking about climate change at 4 to 5 degrees, where it's, for example, destroyed the wine industry in California. So, and you haven't been able to do that. But science has responded by creating synthetic wines. And those synthetic wines are really good, but they lack something. But as you go further into the future, our supplies of vintage wines become rarer. And this is the story of the last bottle of wine and the experience of consuming that last bottle of wine and what it's all about. And that's about rarity, exclusivity, and high value. And that drives the experience economy. It drives top-end restaurants and wine bars. And to a certain extent, there's also that debate about visiting the last resort or seeing the glaziers before they melt. Yeah. So this is just that classical example. And how much would you pay for that last experience in the terms of what you do? Because it's quite chilling of what it's all about. Exclusivity, top end, in the terms of prices. But luxury is about exclusivity and doing that. So that's one example of doing that. So it's where you do. We talk about Royal Mayfair and the chapter by Susan Harkinson from AUT University in New Zealand, and she talks about the royal family selling itself out. They've sold their soul in the terms of McDonald's and Burger King and Starbucks, and creating that to create revenue. They talk about Royal Mayfair in the terms of we need to create revenue because we're in a time of economic recession, and how industries respond with fine dining experiences, exclusive experiences, and looking at novelty, in the terms of what they are. We also talk about some of the design challenges about, Chapter 9 and Roots. It's a case study of some of the issues around the noodles of Japan and the traditional noodle, and because of the price of wheat. The price of wheat is getting very expensive. We're also in Japan. It's also about Japan and aging population. So nobody wants to train as a noodle chef. So those traditions about how do you hand down experiences, how you make something, is tacit knowledge. You've got to learn to be a noodle chef on the job to make the best noodles in the world. And how do you create that, and what do you do in the terms of that? So the loss of the noodle in Japan as a consequence in the terms of that high end authentic experiences, in the terms of doing that.
Yeah.
We've talked about home hospitality and the Faroe Islands and some of the design challenges that we've got there, and how the islands can use cultural identity and what the food is to create a very immersive local experience that everybody can buy into. In terms of, because regenerative hospitality and regenerative food is about everybody being involved in the terms of doing things, and that becomes extremely important.
Yeah. So,
but on the other hand, it is we talk about new restaurants. If you look at Dr. Spock's restaurant, we look at the present debate about cell-based food, because at the moment in vitro food is only available to buy in Singapore. You can go, there's one licensed butcher, there's one licensed restaurant where you can go to get this type of food. And there's also a fear of science and change, because we've had all of the debates about GM food and we want something natural and that type of thing. but we're creating the debate. It's all about price and accessibility. Where do you trade off price and overcoming your fear of science to eat that in the terms of doing things? So there's lots going on in the terms of doing things. And we talk about here in Leeuwarden, we talked about the advancements of science in the Wadden Sea area. Because the food here in Leeuwarden, the northern provinces of the Netherlands, is very earthy and very salty. So how do you take the science of salt and taste to create new types of species in the terms of new types of fish, new types of seaweed? How do you use the water in the sea to change flavors? Because flavors is right at the heart of science and what we do. So the purpose of the design challenges was to drive innovation, because the restaurant industry, the restaurant industry is all about innovation. It's a very entrepreneurial, adaptive, fast-paced industries where you have diversity, and it's also about opportunity. The restaurant industry, the food industry, never stands still.
Yeah. How should the hoteliers or chefs start the future proofing today? Because I'm sure the chefs who are listening in here, some of them are getting wondering, where is the future now? So any tips you can just give them to calm them down?
Yeah, well, I think let's look at the role of the chef. There's actually less. There's a real big issue about chefs at the moment. There's less of them.
Yeah.
So I think as a chef, the chef is not the chef anymore.
Yeah.
The chef is now an ambassador and a food activist. So the role of the chef changes. You've got to be at the forefront of representing the changing values in society. You are the new ambassadors. You are the new climate change activists in the terms of where you go. And if you're doing that, you become the center of the community. You become the spokesperson of change around climate change. But the thing about food is not just about the environment. You embrace innovation, new ideas, new foods. Your consumer and the person that eats what you produce wants novelty, wants that new experience. So you embrace innovation. You adapt to new ideas of food service. We talked. One of the scenarios talks about actually the chef is replaced by a robot, and we're at that stage where does that mean the end of the chef? And a robot produces the food, but that's just an extension of technology and science in the kitchen at the moment. But to write the program or to write the algorithm that drives the robot to cook it, it's got to be the human that creates the input or the large language model to drive all of that change. And if we've got a shortage of chefs in the future, let the robotics develop that. Let the robotics create economies of scale in the refinements to do that in the terms of doing things. So you're embracing AI, you're embracing technology, but so you become passionate about food. You become the storyteller, the ambassador, the historian for the place. So you're wearing all of these multiple hats in the terms of going forward. So it enhances the role of the hotelier, it enhances the role of the restaurateur, it enhances the role of the chef going forward, because you become the icon of change and embracement. So you've got everything from history, authenticity, to the experience economy, and you're passionate about that.
Very good. I think you have calmed down most of the chefs now listening. So out of those 4 scenarios that we talked about, Which scenario do you personally feel is more likely or most worth working toward, or is there one?
I think there's a degree of when you do scenarios, there's a degree of truth in all of them.
Yeah.
There's not just one pathway of what we do. We as a consumer are interested in breadth and novelty and experiences. We want to taste something new in the terms of sampling, but we also want safety and authenticity. So you need to ask the question, look at all 4 scenarios and what conclusions do you draw of what you want. But also with the 4 scenarios, it gives destinations or restaurants or businesses the opportunity to say, this is the pathway I want to follow, and this is what I want to do. Because the restaurant industry is not just about doing everything, it's about doing something. So look at the 4 scenarios and you pick up what you feel comfortable with in the terms of going forward. Because they're all shaped, each scenario is shaped by 15 to 16 different trends in the terms of what you go. But the key things I'm trying to say is innovation and sustainability go together. Yeah. But climate change is going to happen. But to deal with it, we drive sustainability in parallel with innovation, and they come together to create something, to preserve the past or to create something new.
Very good. Okay, there's clearly a call to action to all the chefs and hoteliers who are listening in. So, which is the pathway you would like to follow? So please write in the comment, and I will summarize all the comments, and I'll pass them back to Dr. Yeoman as a appreciation of that he has been here today. So my final question then is, what is sort of how do people find you, or how can they reach out if they want to connect with you, and how can they find the book that's coming out?
Okay. Well, the book's available on Channel View's website, which I'll send you the link, channelview.com.
Okay.
And I'll also give you the discount code for the book. But if you just Google Ian Yeoman, I'm on LinkedIn, and I've got a strong website presence on our university website at NHL Stendon. So just Google the name. I'm there. And also I'll give you my email address as well, and you can put that on into the video and all of the contact details.
Very good. So in conclusion, Ian, I appreciate you joining today's episode, and thank you very much for all your fantastic insight.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the Social Hotelier. If you enjoy this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. We have an incredible lineup of guests coming your way, so stay tuned for more thought-provoking conversations. Until next time, take care and keep exploring.